Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I have 11 career special teams tackles over here on my resume. In all seriousness, joining me tonight are my guys, Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing tonight?
I could not believe that was full chest, said with all that pride that Emmanuel Acho had more tackles than Austin Eckler. He currently has fewer tackles on his career than long snapper Josh Harris for the Chargers.
Oof.
But for whatever reason, man, he's like, yeah, more than Austin Eckler. That's what I'm going to tweet today, which is more than I have. But still, I wouldn't have gone out of the way to say I have more than Austin Eckler.
I know, and he thought he was being so funny when he said it was because Justin Herbert was throwing all these interceptions, and it turns out all of them are from 2017 and 18 when he was actually playing special teams, and Philip Rivers was obviously the quarterback then. So, very strange social media interaction from somebody who is continually strange on social media. So, Alex is here as well, man. Alex, what's up? How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Emmanuel Acho is officially crossing into Skip Bayless territory. For those who remember, Skip Bayless bragging about his 1.4 points per game in high school to Jalen Rose on national television. So that's the type of territory we're in with Acho now. So glad that that's going to get a lot of attention this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty clear like what FS1 is trying to do with Emmanuel Acho's career, and that's a pretty good comparison there by Alex. So. Obviously, we are here to preview the Chargers' upcoming matchup with the Miami Dolphins. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful week on social media and definitely not toxic at all. But we are going to dive into just kind of the nitty gritty of this matchup as we always do. Before we get started there, I feel like we kind of just need to do like a vibe check between the three of us in regards to where the Chargers are at right now. Just kind of talking about what has kind of transpired over the last few days. So I guess I'll start here. For whatever reason, like I played high school sports, I played community college football for a year, and I've just been conditioned for like this 24-hour rule like my whole life, right? Like 24 hours is like you just get over it, and that is obviously I've tried to carry that over for the Chargers in my whole life as a fan. But this Raiders loss has stuck with me still today, 3 days later. And I just I can't stop not being frustrated by it. And watching the film back last night just made me even more frustrated again. And so I felt like I needed to talk about it with my guys and kind of vent some more frustrations about what was happening this week. I don't know if anybody else is feeling that way. If you're in the chat and you feel that way as well, feel free to let some stuff out. But just watching the film back and we talked about the offense, we talked about a lot of the things on defense. The missed tackles on Sunday afternoon, man, it was just unreal. It was like I think the Chargers had they had some good reps for sure against the run, but there were like 6 or 7 other opportunities where somebody on the Chargers defense had Josh Jacobs behind the line of scrimmage, and it ended up being like a 9-yard gain or a 12-yard gain. And he was just making missed tackle here, missed tackle there. Like the numbers are not great, obviously. And I feel like they were worse than they actually are in terms of missed tackles. So that was definitely something that stood out to me from watching the film, was just all of the missed opportunities within the game. And then obviously the game as a whole from a missed opportunity standpoint from the Chargers.
In terms of the vibe right now, on the way home from school today, I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of how I feel with the game and that loss, is that I haven't watched it. I haven't looked back on it. I haven't, messaged my dad about it really or anything since we saw like there's been nothing. And really that loss to me, not only did it feel like it killed the season for me, and like I'll still cheer for the Chargers this weekend, don't get me wrong, but it just felt like not just really the end of the season, even though it statistically isn't. It just felt like the end of, and I talked about this on our post-game show, of my spark. Like I didn't care about Chargers football this week, honestly. Like I barely even wanted to do the show. I'm on obviously for you guys and for everybody in the chat, but like talk about the Chargers and preview them. And you look at the numbers, everything's terrible on offense, everything's terrible on defense, except for the fact that the Chargers are somehow like 14th in points per game. But still, like everything is basically bad. Protection is bad. The run game is one of the worst in the league. The defense is terrible. It's historically bad, potentially, for Justin Herbert. the coaching's not great, the injuries are bad, the record's not great, you lose to the Raiders. The whole thing, man, just sucks. I'm not watching this game over. And as far as vibe check goes right now, my fandom is kind of taking a hit so far right now.
Yeah, the vibes are pretty horrendous. I just think it's funny that amongst the three of us, it was a different game that broke each of us. It was the Chiefs game for Tyler. It was the Cardinals game for me, and then it was the Raiders game for Steven.
Yeah.
It is repetition thing every week. Different players injured. Okay, here's more missed tackles. Here's that. And so, in terms of seeing the same stuff every week, it can get pretty depressing. And you hope that the next game, the Dolphins game and the Titans game, you hope, because in theory, right, what this team should is, and you hope for a performance where they finally put it all together. Are they putting it together for just one game? Are they putting it together for a series of games after this? That is really the thing. And under Brandon Staley, the Chargers have not gone on like a real extended winning streak where they win 2 or 3 in a row, right? So, you can have one great week, maybe against the Dolphins this week, and then they get regressed against the Titans or vice versa. So that's just kind of been the stipulation under this Staley regime, particularly this year with how the games have been played, unlike, the 8-5 year where they lose, 1-3 in the last 4 games in 2021. But this season just kind of has gone up and down, and it never felt like the Chargers really have gotten momentum in the positive direction, and it's been a lot of the negative stuff we've talked about, unfortunately, from week to week. So hope for obviously a turnaround. I hope they go 4-1 in their last 5 games, as improbable as that is. It won't happen, but hoping for that. But it just feels like the Chargers can never get that momentum going in the right direction because of a lot of the I guess strategic problems that we've talked about, as well as the organizational and team problems and injury problems we continuously keep talking about.
Yeah, the inconsistency from a week-to-week game planning perspective is just really frustrating to watch because, I think if you go back and you watch San Francisco game, at least the first half, you see them do really smart things in regards to a very limited offensive line. It was max protect. It was running the football. It was screen game. It was play action attempts. And then you bring out basically that same offensive line against the Raiders, and Zion Johnson gets hurt and misses like 12 snaps or whatever it ended up being. And it was just continual, dropbacks of traditional dropbacks, 5-step, 7-step dropbacks. And you're just hanging Justin Herbert out to dry, and you're not running the football like I talked about on Sunday afternoon after the game. So it just was really frustrating. Watching film has always been kind of something that is almost like therapeutic for me. So I wanted to make sure I watched it, and there were definitely some positive things that I think you could certainly talk about from a player perspective. But it's just really frustrating that in week 13, we're still just seeing, a lack of identity on this team. Like, I don't know where the Chargers are hanging their hat right now on offense and defense. Like, I know what I'm getting from the special teams unit, and that's frankly the best part of the team right now, which is just sad, from where we have been in the past with this team. But offensively, it just feels like, hey, Justin, go be great. Like, hey, Keenan, go beat it, go win a slant, every single other snap. And, hey, Josh Palmer, like, try and keep developing. And Austin Eckler, here's 12 flat routes for you and a couple screen passes. And it's just, it's incredibly frustrating to watch them flounder these opportunities. And again, if they had just, I don't want to say be smart, right? Like they're NFL coaches, like they're not dumb people, right? But, prepare at a higher level, then they would have been able to beat the Raiders. And then we'd be talking about a very different conversation today with a team that has, higher playoff chances than what this team currently has. So it was such a big missed opportunity on Sunday. And I've just been like so frustrated just thinking about that game and the upcoming games as well. So, obviously I want to talk about more positive things. Like I would love to cover a winning franchise again. Like I would love to be able to go back into 2018 and cover a playoff push and how fun that season was. And, this season just feels like one big missed opportunity, with every missed opportunity possible within each game.
Yeah.
I think what's really just struck me over the last year, and it's around the same time that I left last semester from this island, is the last game I watched was Travis Kelce running through the defense where a bunch of people don't tackle him. And here come the Chargers. They play a really close game, but they have a lot of flaws and a lot of injuries that prevent them from playing that close game. And then the coaching itself is not that great, and a lot of other problems on top of that. So where has this team come in a year? And I guess just from where they've ended last season, I feel like they're in the same spot that they were towards the end of last season. I feel like nothing has changed. And if things have changed, they've tend to gotten worse, except from a couple, individual players who have broken out, Josh Palmer being one of them, of course, Trey Pipkins' development earlier in the year. But, aside from some of the individual stories and things that we talk about on this team, it's just been a lot of the same. And unfortunately, a lot of regression in some areas, even, on the coaching staff.
And you could have felt it in the stands. And this is part of the reason that Kansas City loss really broke me, is watching Travis Kelce, score the touchdowns and whatnot. That sucked. But on the final drive that Mahomes had, the stadium couldn't even really get up and cheer and be excited and try to go crazy, and create noise. Everyone knew what was going to happen, and we were right. Twitter knew, everyone in the building knew. And granted, it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Obviously they're probably going to score anyway, but just feeling like you have a defensive head coach, you have this defense who, has historically, the Chargers have played okay or pretty solid against Patrick Mahomes. You're hoping for something maybe, and the stadium is just kind of we just sat there and watched. There's no belief really in this team at this point in the season, or at least even at that game, where it's okay, we're gonna get this done, we're gonna get a stop or something. No, you could just tell in the stands, and the air was sucked out of that stadium. That's kind of where we're at. I would love a spark of something, any kind of hope, but there isn't. And to get frankly out coached by the Raiders and Josh McDaniels, who have, up for most of the season, have been a laughing stock, and losing those close games, like an 2020 Anthony Lynn team, to get beaten by them and to need that win to increase your playoff odds, to try to avenge your loss from last year when they kicked you out of the postseason, to lose to maybe a slightly less hurt, but still, I think an inferior Raiders squad. There's just nothing there for me. It's just so hard for me to get excited moving forward the rest of the year, because it's just a couple of soul-sucking losses.
Do you have something there, Alex? Okay. Yeah, I've definitely felt that this week. And before we dive into this matchup, I do want to say there was definitely some positive things that I watched on tape. For me, the first thing that I wanted to positively shout out, Michael Davis was fantastic, man. Michael Davis was continually in the right positions on Davante Adams. I thought that he was absolutely the best cover guy against Davante on Sunday afternoon. Consistently, making plays and run support as well. Michael Davis has been who we thought that he was going to be last year. He's been a really solid cornerback for them, and they absolutely have needed that. So, I wanted to give Michael Davis a shout out. I also want to give Morgan Fox a shout out, because Morgan Fox has really elevated his play ever since Austin Johnson has been injured. So obviously we know that Morgan Fox has been one of the most efficient pass rushers in terms of defensive tackles, and that has not changed. He's 2 pressures away from a career high, which has been really fun to watch. But he was fantastic against the run on Sunday afternoon. So in terms of positive vibes, I do want to shout out those 2 players, because I thought that, frankly, those 2 players were the best players on the Chargers defense on Sunday against the Raiders. And I feel like they deserve some love for sure.
Good. I mean, that's great to hear. And I at least saw it. And we can see the last couple of weeks with Morgan Fox, because there was a point where his run stop rate was lower than Jerry Tillery's in that rotational sort of role. Yeah. So to hear that Austin Johnson gets hurt, Otito gets hurt, Covington gets hurt, and now Morgan Fox has to play a more run heavy starter kind of role, that should be a bad thing. And, there are moments where it definitely has been, but he has at least stepped up in the playmaking department when it comes to stopping the run. And that's really, really huge.
Yeah, and
It
obviously
hasn't mattered, but
that's the other thing too. I tweeted this, but I thought Zion Johnson had his best game in terms of pass protection against the Raiders, and it just didn't even make a dent because the pass protection plan was so bad. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit here in a second. Like I'm planning to talk about it for the game preview. But it's frustrating to watch like these individual players like have key moments and have good seasons. Like Bryce Callahan is having an awesome season, and Michael Davis is having a really good season, and Morgan Fox is having a really good season. And it's like, okay, like the Chargers are worse on defense than they were last year. So it's just, it feels very deflating right now to even like talk about the Chargers in a positive light at all. So, all right, let's dive into this matchup, I guess. Enough ranting, I guess. But obviously wanted to, get some things off of our chest. So, Tyler, let's pull up the slideshow for this week. I was looking forward to seeing what you would cook up this week for the Miami Dolphins preview. Obviously, we're coming to the end of the season, so we're not going to have a full deep dive into the roster, but we'll certainly mention some things and talk about who's playing well for the Dolphins, who's a key player, and things like that. And obviously, if this is your first rodeo and you're wondering what the hell is going on with the graphic right now, this is just our way of having some fun on the show. So let's dive into this coaching staff first and foremost. Really made me miss Frank Smith kind of looking at this coaching staff. But obviously Mike McDaniel, the head coach, calls plays for the Miami Dolphins, has really been able to kind of elevate their offense along with Frank Smith, along with Tyreek Hill and all these guys. Tyler, what's kind of your assessment of the way Mike McDaniel has kind of built the staff as well as obviously performed through 13 weeks of the season?
Yeah, a team hired a genius, or a so-called genius, and it actually seems like it's paying off on that side of the ball. That's a great thing. And frankly, he doesn't really have all the horses to get it done. Now, of course, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Gesicki, all these guys, absolutely. But he's had a lot of work to do, and their offensive line isn't really all that great. They did Teron Armstead, which is huge. But he's made it work. And even understanding that offensive line, I was looking through this and shocked to see that in terms of, time to throw, like Tua's third in the NFL in terms of time to throw, or in terms of quickest time to throw, I should say, for release. And if you look at true pass sets, I was just curious because the numbers look so low. Teron Armstead, granted he's missed a game, has had only 87 true pass sets out of the hundreds of whatever snaps that he's had. Granted, he's missed one game. Matt Filer has had 286. And you just see two different coaching philosophies. And I assume it has something to do with the pass protection and understanding what maybe Tua does well, and also not wanting to get him killed behind a not so great offensive line that was terrible last year. But right now their pass blocking efficiency is about the same as the Chargers, but Herbert's been hit way more. He's been pressured way more. And I feel like their scheme and their plan on offense has been really, really solid. And on top of that, they're an elite passing attack right now. Again, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, that definitely helps. But you have to make that work, and they certainly are. And Frank Smith, man, I underestimated how much he had an influence on this team.
Yeah,
because you didn't see it for very long, and frankly, like you get Corey Linsley at the time. Matt Filer was a very good guard. You get Rashawn Slater in the first round. You had Ode Abushi. Like, okay, like you should see a pretty good line as is, but the Chargers are just a completely different offensive line right now, especially in the last 3 or 4 games. And you even see the Raiders kind of go out of character to rush the passer in different ways and to blitz in ways that they weren't really doing before, because people are understanding now that you can take advantage of this offensive line. And someone like Frank Smith, I think, was just a huge part of that. Obviously, a huge part of the run game as well. The Dolphins have done a really, really good job of getting to talent around Tua, having a good, smart head coach, and getting a great offensive coordinator / I don't know if he's not their line coach, but I'm sure there's some influence there. And frankly, having Frank Smith, I'm sure is a bonus to them. I know. Very good.
Well done. It's just been, as a casual fan, like you look at this offense and really outside of Tyreek Hill, everybody is back from last year. I mean, you can talk about, Trent Sherfield and Jeff Wilson and things like that. But I looked at the way that this team had kind of developed their internal talent. I mean, like the way that they were trying to develop Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg and all these guys, all these offensive linemen, and like switching them positions, and like there was never a home for these guys. And this year Frank Smith and Mike McDaniel and all these guys, like Liam Eichenberg is hurt right now, and it's like, holy shit, like Liam Eichenberg is hurt. That's a huge deal. Like it's just been such a big transition for them. And outside of just Tua, like, and instilling the confidence in him to effectively do his job and play to his potential, they're doing these great things along the offensive line as well. I mean, there are certainly some curious decisions, like their decision to franchise tag Mike Gesicki and then like not use him is a little puzzling to me. I didn't really understand like his fit to into that scheme, but I think overall this offensive staff, they hired a lot of smart people, and Frank Smith, Mike McDaniel, like it's just it's a great pairing. It's a pairing that almost would have happened with the Chargers if Kyle Shanahan had not blocked that interview. But they're just doing a great job, objectively speaking. I know there's this weird rivalry with the Dolphins and the Chargers, but the Dolphins have done a lot of smart things. They're reviving a lot of careers of these young players, and it's something that I don't want to say I'm jealous of, but I am kind of jealous of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to say there is that kind of feud with fans right now. But honestly, especially as someone who had Tua higher than Herbert in the draft process, I'm so happy for Tua. I'm so happy for everything that is going his way this year. I mean, he's number one in Pro Bowl voting right now. I don't think he makes All Pro by any means, or second team All Pro, but he's in the discussion. And hell, like compared to where he was his first year, the second year, like nobody really saw that coming. And I didn't have the Dolphins making the playoffs, even though you could see all the talent around them. It all came down to Tua, and it's working. Whatever they're doing, not that I've watched every game by any means, but it's working. And I'm so happy for him. And he even said in that interview, like he wondered if he sucked. He's like, do I suck? Am I a terrible football player? Because the front office doesn't want me. And he's even said the fans made him feel like he sucked, which is hilarious because now they're all toxic and going out of their way to defend him. But there was a point where he just felt like I must be a terrible quarterback. No one believes in me. And this coach walks in and goes, no, here's all these plays and hundreds of hours of plays or whatever it is that I believe in you. This is where you're really good. And now they're 5th in EPA per play, 8th in points per game, and they're headed to the postseason. And they're probably going to whoop my Chargers on Sunday Night Football. So honestly, of course I want the Chargers to win, but good for Tua and good for them. Seriously, I'm really, really happy for him.
Yeah, one of my best friends from college, Josh, is a Dolphins fan, and me and him obviously have talked about a lot of things, this season. And as Reality Check points out, it's a lot of the propaganda and the way that they are talked about versus like actually having beef with the Dolphins. And I felt a very similar way last year with the Bengals, and it's just like the way that their quarterbacks were talked about versus our quarterback, and I understand that. But I think Tua, he had all these crazy injuries, and then, his first season, he was getting, benched in the middle of games. And then basically his coach was just like openly talking shit about him as a rookie. It was just kind of a disaster. And so, like you said, I feel like, this is a story that you feel good about. I certainly don't think that he is, he's like second in the league in EPA per dropback right now. And he's like on a historically good pace. I don't think he's that kind of quarterback. But I think you like, I said this during the draft. I think you can absolutely win with Tua at quarterback. Like you can win with, a Kirk Cousins, as Jimmy G, if things are right around him. And it certainly seems that things are right around them this year. So moving on to the defense a little bit here, we can kind of dive into this personnel a little bit. Mm-hmm. Josh Boyer was on the staff with Brian Flores, so he was kind of the holdover. He was somebody that this regime was very interested in keeping around. The results have been a little mixed this year as opposed to years past. Obviously, they go out and make the big swing for Bradley Chubb to kind of help swing things, but the defensive cohesiveness has just not been there at the level that I think they would have hoped heading into the season. It hasn't really mattered because their offense is just like lighting it up every single week. As Tyler has pointed out here, they're 17th in EPA per play. They're 25th in points per game. Their pressure statistics, which I was going to dive into a little bit more, very similar to the Chargers. They blitz a lot, don't get pressure a lot. So kind of a mixed bag there. Although obviously that's something to be concerned about for the Chargers this week, depending on who plays. But they still have a lot of talented dudes on that side. Xavier Howard, you're talking about Melvin Ingram is playing for this team. Christian Wilkins is playing some good ball. Jerome Baker is a quality linebacker. So they haven't put it all together yet, but I still think that there's enough talent here on the Dolphins defensive side of the ball to make me be concerned about this matchup.
Right. They're dangerous, at least. Like you said, man, the defense hasn't been great, but the offense has been awesome. So you don't even really have to talk about that. I'm sure Dolphins fans do. But, it's all about, oh, look at this offense. Oh, they're winning. It's so great. And I wish, like you said, I wish the Chargers had at least one identity somewhere where the other side of the ball didn't matter as much, and we're 8-4, and that's great. But anyway, good for the Dolphins. Jalen Phillips is doing very, very well. I believe he's top 8 in pressures, win rate, and productivity, if I'm not mistaken. He was my number one guy. Of course, he was most people's number one guy coming out that year. And hey, I'm happy for him. That's awesome. I know there were some concerns about concussion history and whatnot, but seems like he's really turned it on. So good for him.
Yeah, I know that people are kind of talking about obviously Bradley Chubb and Melvin Ingram, who I mentioned, but Jalen Phillips has been their most consistent pass rusher this year, and he's developing into the guy that I think everybody kind of who liked him in the draft was hoping that he would. So again, they do a lot of blitzing as we can have on the screen here.
Yep.
So he gets a lot of one-on-one matchups, but he's doing his job. He's taking advantage of those matchups for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know how much we want to get into free agency in the draft. There's not much of a draft.
Sorry, we're trying to get Alex back in here. Had a little bit of technical difficulties there, but trying to multitask and get him back in here as well. All right, so obviously we're going to talk about free agency. A lot of big moves on offense. Tyreek Hill, Connor Williams, who's actually been one of the best centers in the league so far this year. Chase Edmonds kind of replaced by Jeff Wilson, Teron Armstead, Raheem Mostert, Thomas Morstead, the punter, Alec Ingold, one of the rare fullbacks who plays a lot. And then obviously Melvin Ingram. And they just signed Eric Fisher to kind of combat the losses of Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson. So Tyler, who's kind of stood out to you? I mean, obviously Tyreek Hill has been fantastic, but who else has kind of stood out to you from an addition to the Dolphins this year?
I completely forgot that they signed Alec Ingold. Again, I don't watch a ton of Dolphins football unless it just happens to be on and they're playing someone interesting. But Alec Ingold, man, he was a very, very good fullback. And I'm kind of, I'm not bummed that the Raiders let him go. But I mean, after the Chargers, the team I watched the most next is the Raiders. And Ingold was a really good fullback. And of course, you have this system where, you need a fullback in this system. Obviously, he's no Kyle Juszczyk, but he's pretty darn good. And I'm sure the Chargers would have benefited from having someone. And looking at Alec Ingold, I realized that one of the players that I wish the Chargers, of course, had retained was Steven Anderson, which I'm sure would have fixed plenty of issues on offense this year, although certainly not all of them. So that's kind of where my brain was at when I saw that. I don't know why Alec Ingold was the guy that stood out. I don't know, but it just, hey, man, if you have a system that needs a fullback, you get a good fullback, and it's clearly everything seems to be working on offense. That's a good move.
I mean, you're clearly just a big fullback guy. I mean, we got Derek Watt on the show, a couple years ago, Bobby Holly, Steven Anderson. So you're clearly just a big fullback guy, and it's a shame that the Chargers don't use their fullback really ever anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I haven't paid attention to snap counts. Is Xander just not?
It's like 3 or 4 snaps a game. They're not using him at all anymore, which it's so strange to me because the first couple games it was
yeah, exactly.
Here's 15 snaps of Xander Horvath. Here's a couple touchdowns, and it was like, this is awesome. Like this guy's going to be a huge part of the season, and now he can't get on the field.
Great.
So obviously Alex is back. Alex, welcome back into the show. Obviously talking about the Dolphins free agency. Who kind of stands out to you about an addition that they made, or obviously one of the notable losses as well?
Yeah, I mean, Tyreek Hill is obviously the big one in terms of how that has completely changed their offense. But even just the, smaller ones, Raheem Mostert, adding him into the fold in terms of what this Mike McDaniel, run game is. And then, they get another San Francisco running back in acquiring Jeff Wilson at the trade deadline, who has become a fantasy and real life monster sort of for the Dolphins here. So, they just have a bunch of different ways that they can attack you on offense. And don't forget, they have Mike Gesicki, who's one of the better, receiving and blocking tight ends in the league, not an elite tight end by any means, but very serviceable. And so overall, in terms of what they lost, I felt like they just, pretty much recouped value outside of maybe losing Mac Hollins. But then last game, in a couple games, they've had Trent Sherfield, who has really balled out and is, presents some of the similar speed threats that, we would kind of want the Chargers to have. And maybe a guy that they did have in like a Jalen Guyton, but Sherfield's a little bit more shifty in space. So, overall, the Dolphins, one of the reasons I think their offense is so successful is they just have a bunch of guys that can kill you. In terms of speed, they are an explosive play away from happening every play. So in terms of the offense that they've constructed, they've gotten a better offensive line. They now have explosive weapons. Like it's very easy to see why, Tua has taken the leap in EPA that he has, and why the Dolphins offense as a whole has taken the leap that it has as well.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see like the differences that Mike McDaniel has kind of taken from, the San Francisco offense. Obviously, he was with Kyle Shanahan forever. And, in San Francisco, really it's yards after catch, yards after contact, but it's more so like they're fast, but it's more so from a physicality standpoint. Like George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, all those guys are just great at breaking tackles. And then, you get into Miami and what kind of their additions have been in personnel decisions. Obviously, you're talking about Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Trent Sherfield, just dudes who are straight fast. And then obviously, we got the puppy, cute. And then obviously, Raheem Mostert, one of the fastest running backs in the league too. So a lot of good speed from the Dolphins offense is obviously something that the Chargers are going to have to, pay big attention to.
Yeah, and they might have to do without Derwin James.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about the injury report yet. We'll kind of save that for later, but quick super chat from Michael DeFries. He says, you guys do good work. My vibe is bad too. Loss was soul crushing. I'm officially done with Lombardi. So appreciate the super chat. We're glad that we can provide an outlet for some of you, and hopefully you guys appreciate all the effort that we put into this show.
Yes, my slides go Dolphin presentation.
So Tyler mentioned the draft class. It's not a ton. I don't think any of these guys are really even playing for them. Skylar Thompson's been their third string quarterback. He has started a few games for them. I feel like I don't even think that any of these other guys have really played a whole lot. I'm pretty sure Eric Ezukama is like a healthy scratch each week. Channing Tindall was somebody that I really liked a lot, but don't think he's a starter for them by any means. So finally got to a draft class where the Chargers are blowing them out of the water.
Finally, we made it. All they had to do is trade out all their assets, not round 3.
The Dolphins are getting better value out of Skylar Thompson right now than we ever got out of Houston Stick. So,
that's very true. That is very, very
true. He's developing. He's getting there.
I'm going to actually watch some backup quarterback draft film this year. So that's going to be fun.
Dear God.
All right. I think that's it from the Miami slide. So we'll dive into a bit more of the specifics of this matchup. Obviously, as we do every single week, we're going to try and be positive in this regard for victory formation segment. We'll see what kind of happens and how this goes. But Alex, we'll start with you here. What is the one thing that you need to see the Chargers do in order to secure a victory formation on Sunday Night Football?
Pass rush, please. Please, God. Look, it's partially how the Niners beat the Dolphins last week. Now they have a Nick Bosa, and our Bosa is currently missing. So that's a small complication, small wrinkle in the plan. But you just have to get some semblance of pass rush pressure on them. Overall, Niners didn't have a dominant pressure game necessarily by any means. I believe overall they had 14 pressures in the game. But when they had pressures, they made them count. They made Tua hurry out of the pocket. They brought him down 3 times. Nick Bosa did. And so this is kind of a big game, I think, for Khalil Mack, who, I mean, we'll talk about a lot throughout the week. But, you know, they just need to get at least 10 plus pressures at the minimum on Tua and make them effective pressures as well, because Tua has been a very different quarterback when he's been under that consistent pressure. And so this is kind of going to be a test of the Dolphins offensive line as well. But for a Chargers team, you just cannot have the pass rush pressure be nearly as anemic against Derek Carr, or as it was against Derek Carr last week. And if you do that against Tua has the weapons to make you pay for it in comparison to what Derek Carr has. And Derek Carr has Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, which are by no means shabby toys to play with, and Matt Collins. Tua has that to the nth degree, if you want to say that, in terms of having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, in terms of the long developing plays that can turn into, in addition to having, just Trent Sherfield and Mike Gesicki, and then like all of these running backs and Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. So like they have so many ways, like I just, talked about, that they can kill you, that if you're not going to get pass rush pressure, Tua's going to find a check down. Tua's going to, open it up downfield after, cornerback falls over. Like something's going to happen, if you let these long developing plays happen, and Tua, when he's not pressured, is, arguably a top 5 EPA quarterback in the league this year. And so at this point, the Chargers it's kind of a, win or go home game, like in terms of the pass rush. It's a win or go home game in general. But if we don't get better than tied for 53rd in the league, Khalil Mack, or tied for 87th in the league, Chris Rumph, or tied for 111th in the league, Kyle Van Noy this week, then the Chargers can kiss all of their hopes of the.
Oh, you muted yourself right at the
end.
There.
Yeah, well, I just said they could kiss their hopes of the playoffs goodbye if they get those performances. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I listen to Benjamin Solak and Shil Kapani on The Ringer every single Monday. They do fantastic work. I definitely recommend, checking them out. And one of the things that Ben Solak was talking about, and how the Niners were so successful against the Dolphins this week. Obviously, their defense is incredible against everybody. But something that he pointed out, that Next Gen Stats kind of pointed out, the 49ers had their highest rate of press man coverage and their highest blitz rate of the season against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. And it worked to, obviously great success. And so conventional wisdom in terms of defending the Dolphins has really kind of been drop back, try and get 7-8 guys into coverage, play zone coverage, and try and, put a roof on the top of their passing game. But if you go back and look at like the defenses that have had the most success against them, it's the defenses that have blitzed them a lot, and it's the defenses that have done press man coverage a lot. And so basically, people are going to say like, you don't want to, match up one-on-one in this kind of situation. But I think you kind of have to take chances, and you're trying to make Tua, force him into some errors that he hasn't really committed this season. You're trying to make more plays as opposed to trying to not get beat. And I think we've seen the Chargers do that a little bit, especially against the Chiefs. Obviously, in the first game, it worked better than the second game. But they've really kind of cranked up their blitz rate, cranked up their man coverage rate when people are kind of, against offenses that are traditionally, you play zone against these teams. So I am curious if the Chargers do mix it up a little bit more. Obviously, Derwin James being injured would make this kind of a moot point, but if they're really able to heat Tua up, I think that is a big key to this weekend's matchup for sure.
And I would also say it's, sort of what they did in the Niners game as well, in addition to the Chiefs game, right? Where, maybe on third down, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to burn you and you get it to Brendan Ayuk because Derwin came to blitz and, he was wide open, right? But like, you have to take those chances, like Steven said, because if you're not using Derwin in exotic blitz packages, if you're not bringing Drew Tranquil up, if you're not doing any of these things, then the defensive line that they currently have constructed just isn't going to get enough requisite pressure.
Yeah, that really altogether was going to be my victory formation point here, is that the Chargers just need to take those chances. Season's on the line. It's over if you don't win. It's basically over. It really is over if they don't win this game. And I get you want to play really efficient, offense and then, That's great, but it's not working. Or you want to play really, keep a lid on it. Let's play some really efficient, make them drive defense. But that's not working. You're going to have to try to take some swings. This Dolphins team's going to beat you. I'm not picking you to win, Chargers, and no one really thinks you're going to win at home against this Dolphins team, even though they were kind of coming off a loss to the Niners. You watched, or I didn't watch, but watching, Tim Jenkins break down the quarterback play and Tua versus the Niners from that game, you could see the Dolphins had a lot of plays that were open, and just for whatever reason, things were just off by a hair. But that's a team that could have scored 30-something, no problem. They just have missed some opportunities, which kind of sounds like what happened with the Chargers in that same game against the 49ers. And also missing, Teron Armstead's going to be huge. But the Chargers just have to break free of your identity. Like you're going to get, like, Joe Lombardi is going to get fired. At this point, like, he's getting fired. Whether Staley returns or not, he basically has to be gone. But if you want to keep your job, you got to try something else. And Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen are rewarding you with kind of some schoolyard bullshit plays right now. I'm not saying draw that up,
Sure.
but you got to try something. If you want to try Khalil Mack rushing over the A-gap again and Kyle Van Noy doing that, awesome. Try that. Do something. If it's Durbin blitzing, if it's JT Woods blitzing, cool. If we're trying some crazy, we're just going to throw it deep, fuck it and chuck it offense, fine. But you just have to try something different. The same old Chargers this year are not winning games, and they're not beating good teams. You're not going to beat this good team by being the same old selves, and especially without Corey Linsley, without Pipkins, obviously without Slater. It's not going to happen, especially without Derwin James. So just go for it. This is it. Season's on the line. So you have to live with the risky situations. I know you want to be an efficient offense and defense. It's not working. Try something different.
Yeah, I think, you're playing with house money this week. Like Tyler was talking about, nobody expects you to win. Nobody expects you to have a good defensive performance. Nobody expects you to have a good offensive performance. So, we'll see what this coaching staff is made of, right? Like, I think they have been better this season when their backs are against the wall, and I hope that they are feeling that kind of way this week. So, they've done some cool little wrinkles right throughout the season. Like the Derwin blitzing stuff has been really fun to watch. And Sunday they had Khalil Mack line up as a stand-up rusher. Like, that's cool, but they only did it the one time. It's like, okay, like, this is a game where you throw the kitchen sink at this offense, right? Like, I frankly don't care if you give up some big plays if you are taking chances, right? Like, if you're really trying to heat up Tua and it just doesn't work, like, I can live with that because you're actually trying to heat him up. So, they've really gotten away from that recently in terms of the Derwin stuff. I don't think he even blitzed at all this past week. Maybe some of that is a little bit injury related, but this Dolphins offensive line is not a unit that should scare you. This is a Dolphins offensive line that you should try and heat up. So, my thing here, I've talked about it all season long. A few weeks ago, I talked about how the run game was going to be something that really kind of defined the Chargers season, and the Chargers have not run the ball at all. They are statistically one of the worst rushing attacks in the league. And a lot of that, frankly, in my opinion, is that they just do not care about the run game. Joe Lombardi does not want to run the football. And, shout out to Tyler's mom real quick. Big super sticker as always. This is absolutely a game where you have to run the ball like at least 25 times, in my opinion. Like, this is a Miami offense that you try and want to disrupt. And obviously we talked about the defensive side of that thing, but I think this is a game where you want to play ball control a little bit and obviously extend drives and run the football. Joshua Kelly has been really effective, really efficient as a runner since coming back. He's been that way all season. And, he had six design runs against the Las Vegas Raiders last week, and Austin Eckler had 9. 15 design runs is not going to cut it in these games. And I'm not asking for you to go full 50-50 split. I think that's not the smart approach, right, with Justin Herbert at quarterback. But you got to give me like a 60-40 or like a 65-35 as opposed to like an 80-20. So I need to see Joshua Kelly get more involved. I need to see Austin Eckler get more design runs. It was really frustrating watching that film because they were actually running the ball well-ish relative to the Chargers. And then it was just like, they didn't care. Like they just abandoned the run game completely. So to me, the way that the Dolphins kind of will approach this game is they're going to try and do the same things that the Cardinals and the Raiders and the Chiefs have done. and they're going to do a lot of sim pressures. They're going to blitz a lot. They're going to try and confuse the Chargers offensive line. And those teams have been successful in doing that. So one of the biggest ways to combat this kind of pressure and these kind of sim pressure looks is to run the football. And, this is absolutely a game for me where I'm trying to protect my offensive line. I'm trying to protect Justin Herbert. And I think you absolutely have to run the football and really establish the run game in this matchup in order to be successful on offense.
Yeah, and in addition to Joshua Kelly, I mean, I'd like to see some Isaiah Spiller too. I mean, I think last game was the first game that we had Isaiah Spiller is active, but he didn't get any touches. Didn't look like he got any meaningful offensive snaps either, from what I saw. And so, I mean, he had a couple flashes in the games, leading up to this one. So, I mean, I'd like to see him get involved as well. More touches for Kelly, of course, with how efficient he's been. So just as a whole, more running the ball, but even more specific looks for the guys behind Eckler too.
Yeah, 0 snaps for Isaiah Spiller on offense last week.
Yeah, I don't mind him being the RB3 by any means, but I mean, you drafted him. I don't know whose call that was, but it would be nice to use him.
Yeah. And like I said, they were actually running the ball well. They were blocking well. It was, to me, like one of their, best run game performances in terms of the offensive line. And just there was 0 effort in, relying on that. And that to me just doesn't make any sense when you have the kind of injuries that the Chargers are dealing with. So sounds like it's going to be Foster Sarell again this week. You're going to be asking him to live on an island again against Jalen Phillips and Melvin Ingram and Bradley Chubb. Like that's just not how you successfully call plays. So maybe Corey Linsley comes back. And to me, that's absolutely a game where you run the football. So, all right, we'll jump into some key matchups here. Tyler, what's your biggest matchup you're focusing in on for Sunday Night Football?
It's the entire offensive line versus whoever's playing versus whoever's rushing, as boring as that sounds, because it's been so rough watching this Chargers offensive line, whether it's communication, whether it's injuries, whether it's Jerry Tillery blowing past Brendan Jaimes for 3 pressures or he had 6 pressures on the day. Jerry Tillery had, I think 4 of them in one drive, it felt like.
Yeah.
They just have to do a better job of protecting the quarterback. And if that's just pure execution, great. If that's scheme, fine. If that's also just rolling him out, great. But that's what I'll be watching. I didn't think we'd be at a point where Herbert would be, I think, the second most pressured quarterback in the league. But here we are. This is where we're at. And for them to have any chance in this game, Herbert's got to stay clean. It's amazing what Herbert looked like if he's not being rolled out and moved, what the difference is for him when he's got a clean pocket. I know it's so boring. Protect the quarterback. Quarterback plays well, you win games. But it's been so difficult for the Chargers. It's been awful for them the last 3 or 4 games. Some of it just because they've been sending the house against the Cardinals. But the Dolphins are going to do it again. They blitzed the 8th most. Can you pick it up? Can you at least not make extreme mental errors in this game? That's it for me.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of whether can win this game or not, I mean, I'm going to be picking them to lose either way. But Corey Linsley, I mean, I think is the biggest piece in terms of whether they can swing
100%
to a win or not. Because if it's starting again, and you have a Zion Johnson injury mid-game, and then Brendan Jaimes has to come in, right? Corey Linsley just leads so much of the communication. And you can see that just from in terms of the offensive lineups that have been thrown out there in different combinations. It's just always worked best when he's on the field, regardless of who's out there with him. I don't think Pippins is obviously going to play this game as a DNP in practice this today, at least. So we'll see how that progresses throughout the week. Probably not going to play.
Not expected to practice tomorrow, Brandon Staley said.
How Zion kind of recovering from. Yeah, and then how Zion kind of recovering from his injury. At this point, it seems like he's going to go. And then, you sort of have the problems you're dealing with the rest of the line, right? How does Jamari Salyer bounce back? Matt Filer, and, what this season has been like for him. So, yeah, I Tyler, that the point is just a big offensive line game in general. And, specifically, I think the big problem or the big issue will be Corey Linsley. I'm going to go for my key matchup. It's kind of an easy one, but Keenan Allen versus Xavier Howard. This is going to be an interesting game in that regard. I think Keenan got a slander this week, both rightfully and wrongfully so. I don't think this has been a banner for season for Keenan by any means. Obviously, he's been injured, coming back in and coming back out of the lineup. But he had some trouble with Amik Robertson this week. And part of that was just the pressure that was constantly in Herbert's face, and he got his fair share of wins too, like the big touchdown, obviously, on that 4th and 12. But Keenan Allen, I don't have any yards per route run stats from this year, but obviously was regressed pretty heavy in that regard last year. So I would imagine that the yards per route run probably have gone down again this year. So, and just in terms of being able to win one-on-one matchups, like that's what Joe, whether we like it or not, has predicated this offense around, is just being able to beat your guy one-on-one. And Keenan Allen has kind of gone in and out of doing that this year, depending on the game and depending on his injury status. Mike Williams, coming off of an injury, probably will be back this week, if we want to say that. But, Mike Williams is not the guy who's necessarily going to create a whole lot of separation himself. That's not what his game is based around. So you kind of rely on Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer and all these guys, sort of winning their one-on-one matchups consistently, getting separation. Keenan Allen's the guy that you count on to do that, especially against Xavier, who, isn't having the best season by any means compared to, what Xavier Howard's seasons have been in the past in terms of being a ball hawk. Just looking at PFF right now, only has 1 interception on the year, overall 0.6 rating for the season. So not an elite corner matchup, but Xavier Howard can obviously turn it on for any game with how good he is. So I'll like to see what Keenan has coming into this game, and considering the spacing problems that they have on offense and Joe Lombardi's predication to running stick, I think that this game will come down to a lot of one-on-one matchups, and one that I'm looking at.
Yeah, to your point, I am curious to see if the Dolphins do allow Xavier Howard to shadow, Keenan Allen. Obviously, Keenan does a lot of his work out of the slot. If it's not Xavier Howard, their main slot corner has been Kader Kahu, I think is how you say it, undrafted free agent out of Texas A&M Commerce from this past season. So I literally did not even know that this guy was on the roster, let alone their starting slot corner. His numbers are okay. I don't think he's like a complete scrub by any means, but that was definitely a surprise to see that was who their main slot corner was. So definitely curious to see how they kind of approach matching up with Keenan. Obviously, Keenan did not have a banner day against the Raiders. The separation numbers were not, what we've kind of come to expect out of Keenan Allen, but this could be a big game opportunity for him this week. And the Chargers should absolutely try and get him going early and often. So there are a couple different, ways I think you can kind of go about, individual key matchups. Greg Little will be playing left tackle for the Miami Dolphins. He's one of the worst tackles in the league in terms of pass blocking efficiency rating at 94.8, which is lower than Storm Norton was last year. So that's where their left tackle play is at without Teron Armstead. So that absolutely should be a key matchup for Khalil Mack. But I think in addition to obviously getting Keenan Allen going, I really want to see more diversity from what the Chargers are doing with Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler in the passing game. I think they're really kind of living on flat routes and screens and things like that. And, Gerald Everett's having a career season for sure. Austin Eckler is like 3rd in the league in receptions at this point. But I think you really have to attack this Miami linebacker core, this Miami safety group, and really kind of challenge them in the middle of the field. It's not an area that the Chargers have done very often this year. But when we've seen Gerald Everett kind of work crossing routes and post routes and Austin Eckler on angle routes and things like that, we've seen them be successful. So in terms of the Miami side of things, Jerome Baker, Eric Rowe, Brandon Jones are kind of their main 3 in terms of, linebacker and safety coverage guys. None of them they're not tomato cans back there, but they're not like super effective players either. So that is an area of the field that I think you absolutely have to attack this week, more so than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and then defend the post. I think it was Arjun retweeted that the Jalen Waddle post route is like a top 5 route in the league right now. Granted, I think he's only had somewhere like 14 or 17 catches, only 14 or 17 catches in the post, but still, obviously they're going to try to run that. And again, Derwin James might play, or at least he'll be hurt. We have Nasir Adderley. This team just gave us the free flicker. JT Woods, I don't know. So yeah, you're going against one of the best routes in the league right now, the most efficient, explosive routes in the league, which is Jalen Waddle running a post. And you'll do that with Adderley, Gilman, and Woods probably this weekend. So that is a huge matchup.
Yeah, Nasir Adderley was awful on Sunday against the Raiders, in case anyone was wondering. So
I wasn't wondering, but I'm not surprised.
Again, the Miami Dolphins, they attack the middle of the field on offense more than anybody else in the league right now. That's been kind of one of the reasons why they're so successful. That was one of the reasons why the Niners were so good against them, because Fred Warner is an absolute beast and one of the best players in the NFL. So, that's obviously not something the Chargers have. So in terms of Derwin James, he is on the injury report right now. He does have, I think it's a quad injury. Brandon Staley did not comment if it was serious or not. He said that we will see. So
yeah, great. That was the comment for me.
Yeah. If he doesn't play, then there's no way this defense is stopping anything on Sunday night. So hopefully Derwin is okay. Vote for him for Walter Payton Man of the Year. Obviously, we're doing a jersey giveaway for him in order to try and raise some votes as well. So check out our Twitter profile there.
Get a win somewhere, guys. You can do it for free.
We really rallied behind Isaac Rochelle for when he was the nominee. Like, I feel like we should absolutely make Derwin James.
Yeah.
I think he probably deserves it a little bit more than Isaac Rochelle. No shade or anything like that, but Derwin obviously been a fantastic player this year and having a great season.
Yeah, hopefully if Derwin offers to give away signed helmets, he'll at least follow through with his promise.
Yeah, man, I never got my signed helmet from Isaac Rochelle, so it's been fun. It's all right. He's doing well in Cleveland, I guess.
Yeah, he announces his own signings every time he gets signed somewhere. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to the Browns." He just on Twitter. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to Colts."
All right. I think we'll save our bold predictions for Saturday. Are you guys cool with that?
That's fine by me.
All right. Sounds good. So, Alex, any final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
Yeah, last thing on kind of what Steven was saying there in terms of using Eckler and Everett. It feels weird because it feels like Joe Lombardi, who was the same offensive coordinator last year, obviously found more efficient ways to use somebody like a Jared Cook and use somebody like an Austin Eckler in the receiving game pretty consistently, especially Jared Cook towards the end of the year. And then this year it's just been, screen. And then if not, then nothing in the middle of the field when it comes to those two players. So that has been particularly frustrating to watch in the offense. I am rooting for the Chargers. Hope that they win. Big mistake to go away from the color rush this week. You were 5-1. It was an easy layup victory, but hopefully they pull out a win in the powder blue. It will be a pretty jersey matchup because the Dolphins jerseys are nice too. But hopefully we don't get embarrassed in prime time again.
Yep, I will not be going to that game. Not because I also don't want to go to that game, but also I can't go to that game regardless. So yeah, hopefully it's close and respectable. But I feel like it's a win-win. If it's a win, great. If it's a loss, we're a loss closer to actually having some change potentially with this coaching staff. So I guess that's a positive either way.
Such a sad reality that we're living in right now.
Uh-huh.
Again, their playoff chances would be about 65% right now if they had beaten the Raiders. And instead, this is where we're at. So, obviously we'll have you guys covered. We're going to continue to do this. I mean, we covered the season of hell from 2020. So we will continue to make sure you guys are well informed, with these matchups, with everything like that. So we'll continue to put forth our best effort in preparation of the show. Hopefully you guys appreciate it. Hopefully you guys are, sticking with us as well. So That's going to do it for us tonight. Again, we do hope anyone listening would leave us a rating or review. If you are watching right now, make sure and subscribe, turn those notifications on, all that good stuff. So that's going to do it. We'll see you guys next time.